So for this first one, we're going to do a few of them together. You are going to graph this on a number line. So the first thing I need you to do is go ahead and draw a number line. But I don't want you to put everything in your number line. You don't need everything there. One thing I always need you to put as a point of reference is 0. A lot of people just put 0 right in the middle. You can put it off to one side, it doesn't matter. And you always need to have the number that's in the solution. So in this case, -2 needs to be on my number line, which should be to the left of 0. Now we already mentioned that at the -2, I'm either going to make an empty circle or a solid dot, and that depends on these symbols that we have. So for this one, x is greater than or equal to -2. Is that going to be an empty circle or a solid dot? This one's going to be solid. It's underlined. So above the -2, I'm going to draw a circle, and then I'm going to shade it in. The other part of this, though, is I need to have an arrow coming from this dot, and it needs to either point to the left or point to the right. And that arrow is going to represent what this inequality is saying. X is every single number that is greater than or equal to -2. So basically anything that's bigger than -2, I want the arrow that I draw to go towards everything that is bigger than -2. But when we're talking about negatives, it gets a little confusing. So here are our two options. I could draw an arrow that goes left, or I could draw an arrow that goes right. If I draw an arrow that goes to the left, I'm saying that -3, -4, -5, -6, all of those numbers are bigger than -2. If I draw an arrow that goes to the right, I am claiming that -1 is bigger than -2, 0 is bigger than -2, and all the positive numbers are bigger than -2. Because this is negative, it gets a little confusing. Many people would say, well, yeah, -3, 3 is bigger than 2, it should point to the left. But those same people, if you continue going to the right, don't you eventually hit +3, +4, +5? And those also appear to be bigger than -2. What you need to keep in mind is that with negatives, the further left you go, the smaller the number actually is. -1,000 is not bigger than -2. -1,000 is way smaller than -2. The further left you go, the more negative something becomes, the smaller it actually is. So if I want everything that is greater than or equal to -2, I want it to point to the right. All of those numbers are larger than -2, even though it doesn't seem that way sometimes. Like -1, that's bigger than -2. 0, that's bigger than -2. Even though they don't seem like they should be because it's negative, that does work out that way.